Time now for QB1 with Crissy, Froyd, and we're talking about Matt Ryan and the Indianapolis Colts. He is gone from Atlanta, folks, and not coming back. And now, Crissy, I feel like he's got a lot of pressure to prove that, hey, maybe he was underappreciated in Atlanta. Was he?
Yeah, I think that he was. I think whenever you look at the numbers and what he did in his own right in Atlanta, it's indicative of a quarterback who is consistent and who is doing a lot of things well through the air. And while he doesn't really have the same amount of like spark and it factor that some of the quarterbacks, especially the ones that are coming into the modern NFL, the younger guys who seem to be a lot more, I guess, toolsy, if you will, and a lot more athletic. I do think that he did a lot of things well in his own right, but there were so many shortcomings that Atlanta had on offense that it was hard to overcome. And I think the majority of the struggles of this offense, and then some of the things that maybe Ryan took the blame for, were really the blame was to be had on the offensive line at the end of the day, which was one of the poorest in the league for some of the seasons that he was there.
With that in mind, Crissy, is the expectation in his first year with this new team that Indianapolis needs to reach the postseason?
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting because you go and have a quarterback that's going into his first year with a new team. And I think that the same way, not to the same extent, but the same way that rookies go into the NFL and have to transition into something different, there are possibly going to be some hiccups in there. But I do think that he has the ability, if he is the quarterback that we think that he can be, who has been kind of overly criticized, then yeah, I think that this is a team that has a chance to make a postseason run. And the Colts, really a lot of seasons when I cover the AFC South, kind of gave a lot of other teams a really hard time, and was kind of a wild card game for a lot of teams, especially the Titans. So I do think that he does have just the things that he needs purely as a quarterback to lead a team to the postseason. I think that how the Colts operate as a team is obviously going to have something to do with that, but he's received rave reviews from training camp and we're still very early on. And so I think a lot of the just stigma surrounding Matt Ryan and the feelings and opinions have become a lot more positive, and that's a trend that maybe we could see take off in a really big way this year.
Listen, we know that this is a quarterback who is a pro, who's going to show up, who's going to be a quarterback that you can rely on. You mentioned some of his numbers. I do think that maybe some criticism is warranted in terms of his decision-making at key times when Atlanta was in sort of critical situations. And maybe that would be a place where you could point to him and say, you know what, he let the Falcons down there, or that is maybe the one thing that has separated him from truly joining that very short list of elite quarterbacks. I mean, when you analyze everything that he brings to the table, who he is as a quarterback overall, you mentioned the offensive consistency, you know that it's there. Is there something specific that you're going to be looking for, though, that he needs to do to sort of elevate and get into even further into that top tier of elite quarterbacks and potentially do something special with Indianapolis in this second chance that he's been given?
Yeah, I do think that the decision-making thing is a good point. And I do think that that's where he probably needs to improve the most, because we've seen that he has the ability as a passer. But at the end of the day, whenever you make a bad decision and put your team in a bad situation, or it comes at a time that can change the outcome of the game, that at the end of the day is everything. And I do think there's something to be said about pass protection and the offensive line and how that can even mentally affect a player. So I think that even when we talk about quarterback decision making, that if the offensive line play is really poor, that it can almost kind of come back on the offensive line in a way. But I do think that that's an area that he needs to get more consistent in, that he needs to improve in, and it's going to remain to be seen if he can do that in Indianapolis. But I do think that is a good point about how if he is to go on to this higher tier of quarterbacks, he does need to get better there.
And just to kind of point backwards to Atlanta, you know, they have their own sort of quarterback carousel, whatever you want to call it, with Desmond Ridder still needing some development. And then you've got Marcus Mariota in there, something of a second chance reclamation project. Neither one of those guys, I think, is sort of offers that elite level that maybe Falcons fans are used to, though you could make the case didn't do them much good because of everything that you noted, all the other issues that the team had. But when Atlanta looks back, do you think that they will regret letting Matt Ryan get away?
I think there's a decent chance, because I'm not sure that Marcus Mariota or Desmond Ridder, at least for the time being and possibly in the long term, touches the amount of talent that Matt Ryan had. And so I think that if they can get it rolling in Atlanta, and if one of these quarterbacks works out, maybe not, but if they find themselves drafting another quarterback next year and kind of at ground zero there again over the next couple of seasons, and I think that, yeah, they look back and realize that he wasn't really a big part of the problem and that there's a lot more that they need to get fixed.
I'm really excited to see what he's going to do in Indianapolis. I mean, I don't know if a lot of people feel the same way, but it's going to be interesting to see if he really was hamstrung to a certain extent and will thrive in this new environment, or if he won't deliver in terms of expectations to the postseason. It's going to be a really fun storyline to watch. Great stuff from Crissy Froyd, as always, on QB1. Crissy, thanks.
Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more QB1.